PodcastCoug Season 4, Episode 10.
You're listening to the PodcastCoug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The PodcastCoug is your weekly Coug On Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. And now, here is your host, PodcastCoug.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the PodcastCoug. I am James Laurie, the PodcastCoug, and you are listening to the PodcastCoug, where we're all things Cougar football. 30 minutes Coug Talk. We're talking briefly about the Cal disaster and our state of the program, our defense, and our next game against Stanford. Cougs 4-5, 1-5 in the conference. Trees are 4-5, 3-4. in the conference. And of course, last week, Cougs lose to Berkeley down at Berkeley. Cal 20-33, another disaster win. And, you know, given now that we've lost 5 out of the last 6 games, right? Look at our standings in our record. We're just last in the conference, right? The worst in the conference. Certainly in the basement. We didn't expect it to be there. Leach rarely is there, right? And last week we said we would beat Cal, and here we are. It's very clear that losing could be a trend. And while Leach is promoting a level of toughness and urgency that's required, it's simply just not working, right? It's just not working. Could be leadership, talent. It is. It's leadership and talent. And guess who's recruiting those guys, right? So, I mean, you know, maybe it comes down to the coach, right? So it reminds me, absolutely mind-boggling to me that after all these years, consistently not being able to score over 20 points against Justin Wilcox, Jimmy Lake, and Chris Peterson, you know, their defense, right? And somehow we think that it's simply a matter of execution, because it's not. And as the defense gets beat with these teams that are just able to run the football on us, you know, and the offensive line be able to go right to the gut, you know, that 4-man, 3-man, 4-man, aggressively attack us through the ground. I mean, come on, Wilcox, Jimmy Lake, Chris Peterson, they've got our ticket. They know how to get it done. And we've shown time after time, year after year, absolutely unwilling to be able to adjust our defense. So the bottom line is, you guys, it's just going to continue to lose those games, especially the day after Thanksgiving. I mean, it's unfortunate. We think, well, maybe it will be our year. You know, 8 in a row. We lose to Montlake, you know, to the Huskies. Maybe it's going to be our year. But you know what? It's the day after Thanksgiving, and it's crazy. And I don't see changes coming, right? I mean, it could happen. We don't know what tomorrow will bring, right? Everybody thought we would take the Cal game, right? And here we are. So we don't know what tomorrow is, and it could be a surprise for the Apple Cup, but you know what? It's life, and it's one of Leach's worst years ever. He recruited these guys. No one else did. He did. And he should be building them up, not tearing them down, right? After all, these are his guys. He recruited them. If anybody should be publicly called out, right, you know, it's him, right? I mean, if he's going to call his team out, it's he brought them in, right? I mean, so why, you know, beat them down like your dog or something? I mean, you know, So, you know, there's generally never any adjustments. You know, it's talent, and it's coaching, and it's recruiting, and it's lack of leadership, and it's all the above. Check A, B, and C, right? It's all the above. Leadership, recruiting, and talent, and coaching. Maybe all 4. The inability of the offensive line to be able to get off the line and to be able to hit somebody in the mouth, and the inability to be able to implement any changes whatsoever in the running game, or try to be able to deal with some of these challenges that the defense provides. It's just beyond frustrating, right? I mean, if you look at, hey, you know, put an L in the loss column before the game is even played. And because we're not going to change, right? We're just not. And because at this point, 8-9 years later, to not see any kind of adjustment in the defense is just unbelievable. So I find it really, it's kind of arrogant, in denial, and beyond being arrogant. I find it just not wise. It's just not wise. I would say that Leach is would you agree that Leach is a top 10 coach in college football? Without a doubt. I mean, it's compensation. He's got it. He's got everything. But one of his big coaching philosophies, no matter who we play, is we run the pure air raid, no compromises. And his philosophy is, hey, I've been coaching for 20 years and nobody's ever stopped this offense, and nobody ever will, which absolutely, as you know, is not true, right? But who's stopped you? I mean, it's like I said, Jimmy Lake, Justin Wilcox, Chris Peterson, and the coaching tree has figured out, and that coaching tree has figured out how to solve it, how to exploit it, how to scheme against it. And how many more Apple Cups are we going to lose, right? How many more years do we have to keep going through this? But the way he coaches, like even through these bye weeks, it's the same routine, practicing their stuff. It's how it goes on this. It goes in the esoteric world of Mike Leach football, right? I mean, don't get me wrong. Leach is very successful. He just does not adjust the pure raid, air raid execution. Just doesn't adjust it, and so generally we're going to get beat by the brilliant coaches again, like Jimmy Lake, Justin Wilcox, and Chris Peterson, and who know how to defend against the Cougs. So the question is, does Mike Leach not waver from the pure air raid philosophy? Why doesn't he? Why? That's the question, is why does not Mike Leach waver from the pure air raid philosophy? And I think it goes back to the philosophy that it kind of goes against everything he teaches and preaches to the team. It's about routine and making it simple as possible. He thinks it's one of the biggest failures in college football is that it's a very simple game. Everybody overthinks it. Everybody tries to add too much to it. You're essentially not allowing your players to go out there and play freely, except for Gordon, who has the ability to make plays, right, and make adjustments after a quick read, right? So, however, on a week-to-week basis, we're on a week-to-week, we're running the same plays. Every single practice is the same. Tuesday is open field day. Wednesday is red zone day. Thursday is a walkthrough. You clean it up, tons of reps and lots of reps. All good when you're winning. All good. It's golden. All good against cupcakes, but not so good against the Berkeley boys and the Seattle guys, right? The Seattle team, right? So at the end of the day, you get 8-9 years of having the same thing and never really scoring more than 10, 13 points on Wilcox, Lake, or Peterson. Never a blowout against those guys. You'd think that something would change, and you'd think you'd try to look at something else without breaking your air raid philosophies. Unlike a lot of fans are saying, I don't think we're too far off from where we were of the past couple of years, right? This year's a down year, right? Yes, we're more deficient in some areas compared to the past, but from a macro perspective, the biggest difference is that we're not winning the close games this season. I mean, last season we pulled out close games against Utah, Stanford, Cal, and Iowa State, where the outcomes could easily be gone the other way, right? I mean, same thing in 2017. In 2017, we beat Boise State in 3 overtimes, USC by 3, Stanford by 3, and Utah by 8. This season, the shoe has been on the other foot, right? We should have beaten UCLA. We should have beaten Arizona State, Oregon, Cal. We're just a few plays away from an 8-win season. Really, we're just a few plays away, and that's just the way it is this year. There's a time to win, and there's a time to lose. Somebody's got to be at the basement. I mean, somebody, right? So maybe this is our down year. I hate to settle for compromise. We got 3 games left. We can certainly pull it off, right? So where are we? I think we're pretty close to where Mike Leach's teams have been historically. We got a chance to beat Stanford tomorrow, and to be 5-5 heading into our final 2 games. If we finish the season at 6-6, really, is that a deviation for where we've been? Come on, last year's team was fun, and we're not too far away from being 8-5. We just need to win out, including the bowl game. We would end up being 8-5 if you think about that. Now that's wishful thinking. That's a lot of wishful thinking, a lot of hope. Is it possible? Sure, we could certainly win out, and it would be this huge story of the year. But win the AC, anything's possible. We'd shock the world if we crawled out from our bad defense, which I personally think it's talent and subpar leadership, to emerge and ended up 8-5. That's just total wishful thinking. That's delusional. If you think we're going to beat the tree, Stanford, and Oregon State, which obviously is a gimme every year, but Oregon State beats us once every 20 years, right? And we head to Seattle and we win that one and then win our bowl game. Yes, it's possible. Just like walking up to your convenience store and buying that lotto ticket, but it's pretty much delusional, right? It would be a bonus if we win out, an absolute bonus. Looking ahead next season, assuming, Leach is here in the Palouse, sticking around, I see a pattern continuing. We got Utah State, Houston, and Idaho that we open up. Then we've got our Pac-12 schedule following. We got 5 home games, Pac-12 home games. Oregon's going to be rebuilding. Utah's going to be rebuilding. Arizona State, isn't that daunting? Cal is always tough with us. And Stanford, won't be expected to blow us out of the water like, every year. So, but, it comes down to solidifying the defense, the coaching staff, settling on a quarterback. And I'm not concerned about that. Mike Leach knows how to develop quarterbacks, so I'm not too concerned. Improving on the offensive line, we've got to improve. There's only one way, and that's up, and showing a growth on defense, and I think that's possible. But yeah, this year's a bummer. Certainly, it's not. It's not necessarily panic time, really. It depends on the outcome tomorrow afternoon, Dad's weekend. The program in general is in pretty good shape, and especially if Leach returns, he's going to be motivated to keep riding this ship. He's the pirate of the Palouse. He knows what he's doing, doesn't make adjustments. We just got to bring in some talent. We've got to reload or rebuild on the defense. We got to bring in some great coaching staff, possibly. We got to make sure there's leadership. Mike is a very good personnel recruiter, very good for a coaching staff. So very confident about quarterback and personnel recruiting for the coaching staff. So yeah, no question about it. Hey, we're going to come back. After the break, we're going to talk about Stanford, the Stanford Cardinal, the trees next, right here on the second half of the Podcast Coug.
Hey, Coug fans. You're podcasting with James Laurie and the Podcast Coug Radio Network. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show, featuring all things Cougar football in Washington State. To help you get through the week, hit the subscribe button or check us out on iTunes, the App Store, iOS, Google Play, Stitcher, or at podcastcoug.com.
Welcome back to the second half of the Podcast Coug. I am James Laurie, the Podcast Coug, where all things are Cougar football, all things Cougs. And the Cougs are 4-5, 1-5 in the conference. Trees, again, 4-5, 3-4 in the conference. Get this, Martin Stadium, get this. We've gone 22-1 in the last 23 games against opponents at Martin Stadium. We're 22-1 in the last 23 games at Martin. So the Cougs have made it to, and by the way, it's Dad's weekend tomorrow. How fun is that? All the dads coming over for their kids, right? Son and daughter. How fun, sleeping on the floor. Oh, no. They get the bedroom, right? They get the room. Cougs have made it to a bowl game every year since 2015. Stanford's current bowl streak actually began in 2009. and their third season of the Jim Harbaugh, David Shaw era. So those streaks are both in danger. Both teams tomorrow in Pullman, right? Mild weather, cloudy, not going to be raining. It's truly a must win for both teams. Stanford needs to get off the right direction. Quarterback KJ Costello returning to the lineup. Cardinal put up 41 points in a bounce-back win against Zona, and then they had a bye week to prepare for the first two straight road trips. The initial road trip took the Cardinal to Boulder, and they faced a bad, sputtering Colorado group. But instead, the Cardinal lost on a last-second field goal in Boulder. And, literally, they've gone to a bowl game every season under Shaw as the head coach. He just, they're now 2-1 against the rivals. They've got Cal coming up and Notre Dame, of course, and then Stanford. And, they've got Cal and Notre Dame coming up. And so now Stanford has not beaten the Cougs since 2015, so it's been 4 years. We're in the same boat, same position. We suffered that fourth quarter collapse down at Cal. Berkeley that doomed on that 2-touchdown loss, badly botched penalty created that controversy in the days following. That the loss, that 57-yard penalty debacle controversy with the refs and the officiating. But you know what? That's our second most pathetic offensive performance of the season, and it had to do more with the loss than our performance on the field was really the loss, not the refs making that bad 57-yard mistake. Okay, that the outcome would have not have been different. All right, Cougs must go 2-1 again in a stretch. Of course, that includes Stanford tomorrow and Oregon State, right? Which is home, and then a road trip, of course, to Montlake in the Apple Cup. So remember, our defense has struggled against, stopping the run, allowing more than just 193 yards per game, 5 yards per carry. The Cardinal cannot attack our run defense. So it's going to be another bad day, possibly for Stanford. Of course, we're going to air it out. Stanford comes in allowing almost 8 yards per attempt, and that could be a good day for Eric Gordon. Even with the Cal loss, Gordon, he was pretty good. He, excellent, threw a pick or so, but, Golden Bears were able to completely shut down our run game, right? So remember, we've got Borghi to add some balance, but remember, we need to use Max more. Max him out, right? Just max him out. But remember, if Stanford were to be successful, they need to take away the run as Cal did last week, which allowed its excellent secondary to limit our receivers' space on the field. I mean, they just completely, they were so good on defense. I mean, their secondary was amazing at Cal. So Stanford's secondary has its issues, right? Coming into 19, one of the thinnest groups in the conference. Even with all Pac-12 cornerback Paulson Abeto, he's been up and down this season for the secondary. So bottom line, hey, we're a 10.5-point favorite. We're 3-1 at Martin this year, and both programs have been pace setters in the North for the last couple of years. It's Stanford, in that case, for the last decade. So it seems strange for this mid-November to lack the divisional implications, of what historically the Washington State-Stanford game has been. So, still getting to a bowl has got some serious weight. We talked about that. The Cougs, have given, better, we've seen better Stanford teams over the last 3 seasons, and this is the worst Coug defense that we can ever remember in a long time. However, the Cardinal offense is nowhere near equipped to take us down like Cal and probably Washington. So we should roll on this one unless the team has given up. If the Cougs have just given up, which I doubt it. I don't think they have given up. So, we are who we are. We talked about that in the first half of this episode of the podcast Coug, with the 4 things: with leadership, the lack of adjustments, the lack of recruiting, the lack of talent, and the pure air raid offense, inability to make changes and adjustments. It's, we win a lot of games, but boy, I'll tell you, we can't win against those guys that know how to really run against us and stop us. So we're going to see how David Shaw does for the dads on this one. It's Dad's Weekend. And hey, real quick update on our defense secondary. We're going to be short. We've lost a couple guys confirmed, right? Cornerback Daniel Isom, 7-game starter for the Cougs, and Trey Davis. He was a reserve nickel. Remember, he transferred from USC. They were dismissed for violating team rules. They are off the team. Athletic department, doesn't really say specifically what violations were when you get kicked off the team, but we know that what Mike Leach has, he has absolutely zero tolerance for drug use, stealing, or any sort of violence against females. So women. So they're off the team. We just got to reload, right? 1:30 kick, Martin, Dad's Weekend, Pac-12 Networks. I'm going to be there. I'm actually heading out right after the podcast Coug is cut. And let's hope we have a great day tomorrow, right? Let's hope we have a tremendous day and get in the right direction. And we're just going to, but then it's Oregon State, right? So anyway, it's Cougs and Stanford tomorrow, 1:30. Have an incredible weekend. Thanks. That's it for episode 10 of season 4 of the podcast Coug. Let's get ready for Stanford. Here we go. Have a great day tomorrow. Game day, great weekend. And go Cougs.
You've been listening to the Podcast Coug Radio Network with your host, James Laurie. The Podcast Coug is your weekly Coug on Demand show featuring all things Cougs and Washington State Cougar football. This has been a presentation of the Podcast Coug Radio Network. Find us at podcastcoug.com.